always prided myself on my nerve, my ability to wade into the thick of things most people steer clear of, squalid alleys in Mogadishu, makeshift operating rooms in Syria. But nothing could have prepared me for North Korea. Uncertainty wasn't just part of the air there, it was the air. And the moral of this story, it's not just the dark you should be afraid of, sometimes the cold light of day can be much worse. Stepping out of the jet onto the tarmac felt like walking into another era. Gray skies, gray uniforms, gray concrete. The air had a chill sharpness that seemed to cleave right through my down jacket. I was here ostensibly as part of an international delegation to inspect human rights practices. A fancy tour carefully curated to show nothing but sparkling cleanliness and staged happiness. Everything about the airport was unsettlingly quiet. There wasn't the usual hum of luggage conveyors, nor the chatter of passengers. Just the soft, persistent clink and clack of military boots paired with sporadic commands uttered in Korean. I should have been prepared for that. Silence there was disciplined, enforced, probably even weaponized. The in-country guide, Inspector Han, a stern man with a deadpan delivery that could make even a dinner invitation sound like a thinly veiled threat, met us at arrivals. "We hope your stay in DPRK will be most enlightening," he said, flashing a smile that didn't quite meet his eyes. The first sign that something was off was when we were herded not into a fleet of waiting vehicles for diplomats, but onto an old, rickety bus with tinted windows and the persistent smell of diesel. "To limit the environmental footprint," Han explained, seeing my raised eyebrows. The reasoning felt flimsy. Everything else here was so meticulously polished for our visit. Our first stop wasn't a school or a hospital, but a facility so nondescript I almost didn't notice we'd arrived. The building was low, sprawling, brutalist, like something out of an old spy film, and it sat with a heavy permanence in its isolated surroundings. No signs, no identifying marks, just dull concrete and windows too grimy to see through. "Here we demonstrate how we strive for innovation in technology," said Han, escorting us inside. The exterior cold was replaced by a stale, metallic warmth that made my skin prickle. The hallways were narrow, swallowed by shadow, the lighting sporadic and dim. Every now and then, a flicker would catch the corner of my vision, but when I turned, it was just empty corridor stretching out. One of the rooms, sealed by a heavy steel door, caught my attention. There was a slight, almost imperceptible humming sound coming from within, a vibration underfoot that you could feel if you stood still. Han noticed my lingering curiosity. "Maintenance space," he remarked briefly, directing us onward. Everything felt orchestrated, yet beneath the surface, there was an erratic pulse, like a heartbeat struggling to maintain rhythm. In each room, officials described advancements and achievements, but their words were devoid of warmth, rehearsed. The air carried a chemical tang, sharp and acrid, that didn't match with solder or any electronic repairs I was familiar with. We were shown back to our bus as the day waned, the clouds hanging heavy like a promise of rain that would never come. As the doors shut and we started to roll back toward what I assumed would be more benign propaganda stops, I couldn't shake the discomfort clawing at the base of my skull. But it was what I saw as we pulled away that truly lodged itself under my skin. A face, barely visible, pressed against one of those grimy windows. A face twisted in fear or pain, the eyes wide, the mouth open as if caught mid-scream. But as quickly as I saw it, we rounded a corner, and the building was just a gray blur in the distance. That night in my hotel room, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive, charged. Every shadow seemed to flicker with movement, every distant sound a whisper. What was that facility? What was hidden behind the guise of technological advancement? As I lay there, the weight of something unresolved pressed heavy on my chest, like hands quietly urging me to dig deeper. And I knew, even if every instinct screamed to let it go, that tomorrow I'd find a way back to that forsaken building. Under the pale glow of the bedside lamp, I tangled with my sheets, thoughts flaring like matchsticks, brief, scorching, quickly extinguished in the overbearing darkness of my room. My mind circled back relentlessly to the brief tour of the facility I'd been given, ostensibly for a story on emergent technologies. Lurking in the guts of that place was something else, something that wasn't meant to be a part of the public image they polished so vigorously for the press. Resolute, I sat up, pushing the clammy sheets aside. I couldn't shake the feeling of those distant whispers slipping through cracks in the walls, though when I strained my ears, the room fell quiet, but for the dull hum of the aging air conditioner. I flicked off the lamp and let darkness swallow the room, hoping my eyes would clarify the shadows, while knowing deep down that understanding might not bring peace. Morning found me in front of the hotel room mirror, tracing the dark circles under my eyes as if they were the tangible result of the building's secrets pressing against my conscience. With every intention of delving deeper, I dressed quickly and left before dawn painted the sky, driven by the unnerving urge to be in that space again. The town was silent, asleep, or perhaps unwilling to face the day. The facility looked different under the dim morning light, its walls more imposing, the sterile cheerfulness of technological advancement now appearing as a brittle veneer. As I approached, a chill tracked up my spine, an unspoken warning that seeped out from the unseen cracks in the facade. I hadn't planned on how to get past security, but as it turned out, I didn't need to. The gate was inexplicably unlocked, propped open as though someone inside awaited my return or had left in haste. My pulse quickened with both opportunity and dread as I stepped inside, the gravel crunching softly under my footsteps. Inside, the building felt alive despite its emptiness. The air was electric, as though charged with a low hum of energy. Floors that had been pristine yesterday now revealed a slight scuffing, a barely perceptible layer of dust that seemed to mutter secrets under its breath. I followed the signs back to where the lab was located, but instead of the lab door, I came upon a small, unmarked door recessed into the corridor wall. How had I missed this yesterday? It opened noiselessly, and the room beyond was pitch black. A potent mix of chemicals and something fouler hit my nose. I hesitated, the room inviting yet clearly not part of any tour. But curiosity, or something darker, a pull from the shadows themselves, drew me in. I found the light switch, but flicked it to no avail. Dead. My phone's flashlight sliced through the darkness, snagging on a shape in the center of the room. A tank, large and cylindrical, sat like a silent sentinel. Inside, shapes floated, indistinct and blurred. My light skittered across the glass, revealing more than I wanted to see, yet not enough to understand. Movement. There was movement inside the tank. Backing out of the room, my breath caught in shallow bursts, heart thrumming against my chest like a bird desperate to escape its cage. My mind raced to rationalize what I'd seen. It was just a prototype, some new biotech. They could. But the deeper I wandered, fueled by a need to make sense of it all, the stranger things became. Offices looked ransacked, papers strewn about as though abandoned in a hurry. A heavy, metallic scent tinged the air, growing stronger as I approached the main lab. The door, unlike others, was ajar. The lab was chaos embodied. Instruments overturned, glass shattered, and in the center of it all, a pool of dark, viscous liquid that seemed to pulse under my flashlight's beam. The sight rooted me to the spot. I should have left then, should have run, but my eyes caught on something in the fluid, a tag, the kind they put on lab animals. It bore a name, not of any animal I knew, but a person's name, a name I recognized from the company directory. That's when I heard it, a low, keening wail that reverberated through the hallways, mournful and filled with an agony that sounded all too human. My phone slipped from my sweaty grip, clattering to the ground, the light extinguishing on impact. In the newfound darkness, my heart raced not just with fear, but with the agonizing realization of what lay hidden within the polished, promising walls of innovation. I needed to leave, to escape what I had uncovered. But as footsteps approached, deliberate and heavy, I understood it might already be too late. The creak of those floorboards, steady, inevitable. Each footfall, a low groan of wood, sank deeper into the pit of my stomach. My hand trembled on the dusty curtain, which moments ago I had pulled back slightly to reveal the bookcase lever that seduced me into this nightmare. The silence screamed between steps, amplifying my frantic heartbeats and shallow, shaky breaths. I glanced at the door, the frame slightly ajar, the old brass doorknob reflecting a sliver of the dim, flickering light in the hallway outside. It could be my exit or my end, undecided as long as those footsteps crept closer. The urge to dive under the bed wrestled the logic screaming at me to stand tall and confront whatever was to come through that door. Still, my legs failed to decide, frozen as the air I was struggling to breathe. I hadn't seen its face yet, but the house had begun to wear down my nerves. Each portrait in the hallway, each whispering draft, seemed to lace my thoughts with paranoia. When I first entered the Whisperwood Manor, it was a quest for understanding my family's secretive past. Now, it was a desperate bid for survival, where every shadow held a threat. A floorboard outside the room whined louder, harsher, closer. My gut told me to hide, but a part of me stubbornly clung to the thought that perhaps this was merely the house's caretaker. How foolish that hope seemed now, as a shadow darkened the sliver of light beneath the door. My breath hitched, my body coiled tight. Then silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but is thick with unspoken words and stifled fears. The knob began to turn, slow, deliberate. I shuffled backward, not taking my eyes off the door, until my back hit the cold, rough surface of the bookshelf. The hidden shelf that started it all. The door creaked open, easing into the room with excruciating slowness, revealing first an aged, worn shoe, then a leg clad in heavy, dusty fabric. The body that entered was obscured partially by the darkness, but the smell was telltale, rust and earth, as if this person or thing had come straight from the grave. "Who are you?" My voice, hoarser than I expected, broke slightly on the last word. No answer. The figure stepped fully into the room, its features hidden beneath a widened brim hat. The quiet stretched between us, dense, palpable. "You shouldn't be here," it finally said, the voice gravelly, like stones tumbling in a slow river. "No one should." "Why?" The word escaped me before I could think better of it. "It remembers," the figure said, then took a step forward. My heart seized. "It remembers what?" Each word felt heavier than the last. "Everything." The simplicity of that statement, the resignation in the voice, prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. I realized then the true depth of my predicament wasn't just about human threats or the physical confines of this accursed manor. It was deeper, ingrained into the very walls that surrounded us, listening, perhaps even waiting. I mustered what courage was left. "What does it want?" "To reclaim," the figure replied, stepping closer into the wash of moonlight that escaped through the clouds outside the broken window. I squinted, trying to make out the face under the hat, to see if there was any humanity left in those eyes. But just before the light could reveal its secrets, the figure raised its hand. A hand that was not entirely human, the fingers too long, the skin taut and gray. And then the most frightful sound, a low, mournful wail that seemed both far away and far too close, echoing through the hallway, through the manor's bones. The figure stiffened, its head tilting as if listening to a language I could not hear. "It has begun," it whispered, not to me, but to the air itself. The wailing heightened, a siren call through the corridors of the house, vibrating through the floors and walls. I didn't want to stay, didn't want to understand any longer. Terror, real and potent, fueled my limbs. I bolted for the door, passing the ominous figure, brushing against the coarse fabric of its coat. Its icy touch, a dread feeling that would haunt me, but not as much as what I saw when I looked back, just before turning the corner. The empty spaces on the walls, where portraits used to hang, were no longer empty. They now displayed scenes of my arrival, my fearful explorations, each framed painting an echo of my own dread-filled steps through Whisperwood Manor. My own eyes in those paintings, wide with terror, watched me flee. My breath formed frosty plumes in the chill air as I darted down the sagging hallways of Whisperwood Manor, each desperate footfall echoing off the rot-worn wood. I tried not to look at the paintings anymore, to ignore the oppressive dread crawling beneath my skin like insects skittering over a decayed log. Yet, every time my gaze inadvertently flickered to the walls, I was met with another tableau of my mounting fear. Through the labyrinth of corridors, I stumbled into what appeared to be an old dining room. Dust motes danced in the beams of moonlight that breached the room through broken shutters. I paused, my heart hammering against the inside of my chest as if pleading to be let out. The long dining table, draped in a moth-eaten tablecloth, was surrounded by high-backed chairs that looked more like silent sentinels than furniture. I approached, my feet whispering over the scattered debris, when a smell hit me, mildew mixed with the copper tang of old blood. Something crunched under my shoe. Glancing down, I recoiled to find the brittle bones of small creatures scattered across the aged carpet, laying there as if they too had decided this room was as far as they could venture. Thinking it safer to be on the move, I turned towards a heavy door on the far side of the room. It took both hands and all my reserves of courage to push it open. It did so with a grudging creak that seemed to scream in the silence. The room beyond was darker, swathed in shadows that moved an eerie life of their own. As my eyes adjusted, I realized with a pulsing dread that it was not just shadows I was seeing but cloth, velvet drapes, torn and heavy, that obscured what lay beyond. I reached out, fingers trembling, and pulled one back. A gale of rancid air greeted me, and I gagged, stepping back. The smell suggested long decay, far more advanced than anything else in the house. What my eyes met next turned my stomach into ice. An array of mannequins, or at least, I prayed they were only that, stood posed around a grotesque tableau. A dinner party, each figure dressed in tattered finery, their faces not cloth or ceramic, but taxidermied animals. A fox-headed woman wearing a necklace of bone. A hawk-headed man with eyes that glittered too intelligently. I blinked hard. This couldn't be real. I must be imagining things, succumbing to the whispers of the manor. Yet, they stood stark under the touch of my fingers, unyieldingly real, grotesquely tactile. My breath caught as one of the chairs scraped softly against the floor. A small, rational voice insisted it must be a rat or the house settling. Yet, when I turned, a chill slid down my spine. There had been no movement, but now one vacant chair faced me directly, as if inviting me to join this macabre feast. Footsteps. I heard them then, faint but unmistakable above me. Not the skittering of rodents or the groan of old wood, but the deliberate, paced tread of someone, or something, walking with purpose. They were coming down the stairs towards the room I was in, each step a clear, conscious decision. Terror, raw and sharp, punctured my hesitation. I backed away from the dining horror, from the invitation I knew I dared not accept. My escape was clumsy, my body rebelling against the primal need to flee. As I emerged into the original hallway, the rhythm of the footsteps had grown louder, closer, promising a meeting I would not endure. Running as fast as my legs could carry me, breath ragged and painful, I resisted the urge to glance behind, fearing that to see my pursuer would be the last thing I ever saw. Each corner of the manor seemed to conspire against my escape, hallways stretching, doors resisting my frantic pushes. I finally burst through a side entrance into the cold night air. The ground was slick with dew, and the tree line of the surrounding forest stood black against the lesser darkness of the night sky. I didn't stop, didn't dare. The footfalls had ceased, but the silence screamed louder than any sound. As I reached the fringe of the woods, a parting glance at the manor stole my breath away. In an upper window, a figure watched, a silhouette that was painfully familiar. It bore my own features, twisted in a ghastly grimace of warning, or was it an invitation? The window banged shut, snuffing out the ghostly vision, as the final traces of my resolve shattered like glass upon the hard, unyielding reality of Whisperwood Manor.